Okay, we have like 10 from the Northeast, nice. Okay, 3 from Europe, from the South, from the West, dope, dope. Also share the results in a little bit. All right, just so y'all can see. Okay, some people from all over the world, from all over the US. So thank you guys all for tuning in and taking time out of your day to, to talk with us. But now the second poll is academic interest. I also want to say, like, I'm a huge like fan and supporter of like people being undecided. I was like relatively undecided when I came into Yale. You can also select multiple interests because people at Yale absolutely have multiple interests. But oh, okay, wow, like we have a wide range of people. Humanities, social sciences, y'all are all over the place. That's good. All right, so looks like we have, okay, some from humanities and the arts, nice. I'm also in humanities, social sciences, 13 from life and physical sciences, engineering, mathematics, 6 undecided, I see y'all. Just as like a general like kind of like question or like disclaimer, although like I'm only like for the most part involved in humanities and arts, and just generally this is kind of a rule of thumb for like all Yale students, like even if I'm not involved in like a certain area, I probably have friends who are like in that discipline, like I've heard of stuff about it. So still feel free to like send in like your STEM questions, your social science questions, and I'll do my best to answer them. And then our third and last question before we jump into the meat of the STUFO is your class year. All right, mostly seniors as expected. Okay, but also kind of a good range. All right, so mostly seniors as expected, some juniors. Okay, 1 sophomore, hello, 1 sophomore, and 2 first years. Shout out to y'all. And a couple of high school graduates. Okay, cool. But that's just to learn more about y'all, and so I can help better answer your questions. Life sciences includes bio and chem, right? Someone asked in the chat. Yes, I believe so. But now I'm just going to take a look at the Q&As and just start getting answered on your questions. Of course, always keep sending them in throughout the STUFO. But Toby asked the question, do you feel like class and work is too rigorous? Is it difficult to balance schoolwork, clubs and teams, social life, and personal downtime? And so the answer is sometimes it depends. It comes in waves, and also no. And I know that's kind of like an all over the place answer, but I'm going to unpack each part of it. So I think it ultimately comes down to how you build your schedule and how you build your curriculum. Yale doesn't have like a set of core classes. We instead have what are called distributional requirements. So a lot of Yale students like to think of their like Yale career in thirds. So generally you'll take about 36 credits, and roughly a class is equal to 1 credit at Yale. So if you think of that in thirds, there's like maybe 12 credits that are your major, 12 credits that are your 6 distributional requirements. So that's a different language, social sciences, natural sciences, quantitative reasoning, which is basically just math, writing credits, and then also humanities. So over the course of like your time at Yale, fulfill all 6 of those distributional requirements, 2 classes in each distributional requirement. And then that second 12 is just stuff you can just use for fun, like academically wise. So a second major, just classes you want to take for fun, more classes in your major if like you're really enthusiastic about it. But all that is to say you can really mix and match your own curriculum. So where that comes into terms of talking about time commitment and is the work rigorous is Yale's have a really great tool that I think was invented by 2 Yale grads in 2014. And it's called Course Table. And so basically there's over 2,000 classes that are offered at Yale. And Course Table has like a catalog of like all of them like the past 5 years. And so there's 3 ratings basically that you see in Course Table. There's a professor rating on a scale of 1 to 5, a like class quality rating on a scale of 1 to 5, and also really important, a work rating on a scale of 1 to 5. So say you take a semester and you take, usually Yaleys take between 4 and 5 classes. And say you take 5 classes and they all have like a 4.0 or higher work rating, that's probably going to be like a very stressful semester for you just because you have so much work to complete for each class. So usually what a lot of Yaleys will do is they will balance or build their schedules such that they might have a couple of rigorous classes, a couple of kind of like easier classes, one class in the middle. So it just depends on how much you feel like you have the bandwidth for that semester and how much you want to tack on. There's also a term we like to say at Yale, which is called guts, which is basically the equivalent of like an easy A class or like classes that generally fall below like a 2.5 work rating. So it's really common for people to take like 1 or 2 guts, classes with like a 2.5 or less work rating, one class in like the middle 3.0 range, like one class in like the 3.0 to 4 range, and then maybe like, I don't know, 5th class in like the higher range. So basically it all just comes down to how you build your schedule. All that being said, I've had like semesters where I took like 2 like really heavy like reading intensive seminars, like a natural science course. I had like 2 jobs, was involved in like a theater show and 2 different extracurricular groups, and I still had time at the end of the week for my friends. I also realized I forgot to introduce myself in totality, so I can also just do that now, and I can lead that into the next question. My name's Logan, as I said before. I'm a rising junior who was on a gap year, so initially the class of 2022, and I'm the class of 2023. I'm in the very best residential college at Yale, which is of course Silliman. I'm from Lakewood. I'm double majoring in English and theater studies. On campus, I'm involved in creative writing and theater, Yale's oldest and most high performance poetry group, Word Performance Poetry at Yale. And all that is just to say, like, I have like a ton of extracurricular groups, like literally 2 to 3. I regularly do theater shows. I work 2 jobs. Most semesters I'm taking 5 classes. Like I'm doing a lot, and I'm also doing like a lot of like fun stuff on the side. And I still generally find that I still have like a lot of time for like my own leisure. So all that is to say, like, if you want like a really like laid back semester and you just want to chill and you want to take like maybe 3 or 4 guts, or you don't want like a super rigorous semester, that's absolutely something you can design as you pick classes at the beginning of the term. If you want to bite off like a lot more to chew and you want to take like a bunch of like higher work rating classes, that's also something you can do. It really just comes down to how you scale your own time. And a really great resource for that for first years is that you have what's called a first year counselor, or as we belovedly call them, FROCOs. So your FROCO will actually sit down with you and help you with something called blue booking. And blue booking basically is just the act of going through like the whole course table and like searching through those 2,000 courses and finding, the 4 or 5 classes that you want to take. So it's not like you'll be thrown into the pond and like you'll have to figure out, work ratings, all that by yourself. You'll have a ton of guides, both structurally and just, through your friends that you can find to, pick the classes that you want. So all of this is to say, like, it can be sometimes, like, especially during finals, but I think it comes down to how you want to build your schedule. So, like, yes, it can be like really rigorous, but also you can determine how much rigor you want to take on at the beginning of the term. Yeah, good question from Toby. Just scrolling through some more questions. Oh, another good question. Does Yale have equipment for filmmakers? Will be able to rent it for free? So yes. So I believe Yale does have like a film alliance or like a film kind of like filmmaking group. But I think 2 of the major libraries, so Yale's Bass Library and also the Yale CCAM, which is the Center for Creative Arts and Media, both have like cameras, like tripods, a ton of film equipment, audio, like stands and mics that you can rent out as a student for, any like 24-hour, 48 or 72-hour period that you want to rent it for. But those are all, free for use for Yale students. I regularly use them all the time, just, film various videos like for my jobs. But yes, absolutely, you can do that. Just as a quick side question. Okay, Madison asked a question. I've been told that at times, students that do well in high school struggle in college. Based on your experience and or what you've seen, would you agree with this statement? I think it depends, but I would also say like Yale has a lot of really great academic resources and also just social resources for you. So I was a student who did, I think, just personally speaking, like pretty like well in high school. English and history were my strong areas. I was well enough in like, math and sciences. I really cannot do calculus like that. But I think coming into college, like there was kind of like part of what made me like think about struggling or like having to struggle was the idea that like I had all this free time like I didn't have in high school. Because like at least when I attended high school, like pretty much my whole day was structured in like hour and a half blocks from like 7:40 a.m. to like 3:10 p.m. So I think the thing that like a lot of high schoolers don't realize coming into college is that your time is very structured and regimented for you. And it's still rigorous in that, but it's also organized for you. And so part of the work I think for college is not necessarily that there's a huge jump up in work or like jump up in the rigor of work that you have to take on, but also you're a lot more responsible for your own time. A lot of my classes are relatively short. They're like, I don't know, 15 minutes or maybe like or 50, not 15, or maybe like an hour and 15 minutes. And then after, like maybe 1 or 2 classes a day, I'll have like 8, 9, 10 hours of time just to use for homework for other classes, for preparing for the next day, for, like my extracurriculars. So I think it's just that you have to get really good at organizing. And I think part of why some people struggle is they steal that free time and they over account for like how they allot, this much for fun or like this much for work. But part of that is Yale has like a lot of really great, I think like different teaching resources and academic resources. So we have like a writing center, for example, where you can get help for writing essays. You can show up with like a full-fledged finished essay. You can show up with half of a draft. You can literally show up with a blank Google Doc, and someone will help you get ideas or, give you feedback on your writing. There's also a center, I think, for academic strategies. There's an office for career resources. Those are both places that can, help you figure out getting internships, navigating like your current like course load, planning course loads for other, semesters that you're taking at Yale. All of which is to say, I think it just comes down to like how you approach the time that you do have. Like there are some days where like, I'm done with class by like 10 a.m. and I just have the whole day. And so sometimes the next day is more stressful for me if like I take that whole day to like nap and do nothing. But sometimes the next day is like super easy, like if I get ahead on work. And all this is to say also your first year counselor or your FROCO as a first year student at Yale is always there as a resource to help you out with any of your academic questions. And also every residential college that you live in has what's called the dean of college. So the dean of your college is also there to advise your schedule. They'll sign off on your schedule before you finalize it at the beginning of each term. In general, like you can talk to them, about managing classes and stuff. There's also the option to drop classes if they get too stressful, if like, you're just not liking the class midway through the term. And like plenty of my friends have done that. It's very common at Yale to start out with 4 classes or 5 classes and drop down one as you discover, it's not for you. And your dean can also help you in that process. So I don't think necessarily like struggle is guaranteed or like struggle has to be an actual part of the college process. I think it's very avoidable. But I think, how much you struggle and like the extent to which you struggle, it depends on like how you will organize your time. But, that being said, like you can take on a lot your first year fall semester, you can take on a little bit and then kind of ease into it. And I think you would be fine in either way, just depending on how you took advantage of like the support resources around you. So I think you can struggle, but I don't think you necessarily have to, like it's a guarantee for everyone. But if you do, like that's, I think, also a very common experience. And I think there's definitely resources at Yale to help you out for sure. A lot of questions pouring in. I'm just going to scroll through and see some more. Let's see. Toby asked, did you enjoy your gap year? What did you gain from it? Where did you go? So I actually stayed in Colorado for most of my gap year. I decided to take gap year because of COVID. Being like a theater studies major, I wasn't really sure, going to like what would have been my senior year this year, like how I would have done like a theater studies in-person thesis with like all the complications of COVID and like audience dynamics with, only so many people in a room. But for the most part, I wrote a play with one of my best friends. I actually decided to take a gap year with my best friend who I'm currently living with. But her name's Cleopatra, and she's also an English and theater studies double major. So I worked on some playwriting. I did still some, involvement in my extracurricular groups. With words, I wrote some poems. I had about 5 poems published in different literary magazines. So I was just sending out stuff to different, independent, like, literary magazines and, trying to, get my name out there in that way. I was still working a couple of my student jobs. So just doing some work for the admissions office. I did some Zoom virtual theater shows. I've also done some like creative, like game coding or like game development for a video game I started playing when I was in 5th grade. And I just kind of started, doing some of the developing process when I got to high school. But all this basically to say like a lot of it was mostly like personal or like self-made projects. I think most of my friends who did take a gap year or who were considering taking a gap year kind of ended up doing it in one of 2 formats. So the first format, which was the format I did not do, was they either found a full-time job, a full-time internship, or one like huge singular large time commitment that was still beneficial, but it took up like all their time, like 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week. Or alternatively, there was a second structure of people like me who did like, 7 or 8 or 9, or like even fewer than that, little like piecemeal projects at a time. And that would kind of take up, like an hour a day, an hour a day, an hour a day. And it would amount to like roughly about the same amount of work. But overall, I think I just gained like a lot of just like practical experience in like organizing my own time. I think part of what's kind of scary about like college and like getting into college is that you are kind of becoming more and more responsible for your own life, but also the trajectory of what you do with what you learn, if that makes sense. Like it's not like you just take your major, like the work ends when you like go outside of your classes. You have to be consciously thinking about like how am I going to apply what I learned, and like I don't know, like maybe like this race and comedy class, like how I approach like, you know, humor in my writing in the future. Um, so I think I just gained a sense of like feeling like I knew that I had the capacity to be autonomous, and I felt like I could take control of my own future while also feeling like I would have a return to Yale. Um, I also think just in general, Yale can move very fast. And so I think just to have a year where, I mean, things were moving like very slow, like begrudgingly slow even, was good to just kind of make me step back, realize, okay, like this doesn't have to be a rat race. I can like kind of take a breath and like, you know, focus. So I think I gained a lot of like personal like development, but I also just had like a bunch of, you know, other opportunities that came to me as a gap year student. So one of my former professors reached out to me and she asked me to perform like a unpublished Langston Hughes play that they found in the Find Key Rare Books and Manuscripts Library, which is for context, was like a rare library on campus that various authors throughout history have donated their personal works and original correspondence to. So I performed that. I had a role in that with one of my best friends. So that was something I got to do over the gap year. I got asked to be like a Spotify like voice acting podcast, and so I also did that. I got some like real life theater experience and, you know, some real life, you know, experience like what I would ideally be employed in after I graduate. But where did I go? Actually, I just stayed at home in Colorado all like, you know, 16, 18 months. But I also had friends who, you know, traveled around too, as, you know, travel restrictions allowed them. But I think it was good for me, but I also think I have friends who didn't take the gap year and they also got a lot out of, you know, taking college online too. But overall, I think I enjoyed it. Ideally, I would never have to do it again, because, you know, the circumstances that made it necessary wouldn't happen again. But I think I got a lot out of it for sure. Just scrolling more through more questions. Jack, and I believe someone else also asked about, I'm interested in the study abroad program at Yale. Do you know anyone who has studied abroad? If so, what information about the program can you give us? So yes, so I was initially also going to study abroad in the summer of 2020. But then obviously COVID happened, and so that was no longer possible. But the process leading up to that was basically around in February, you'll start applying to some of your study abroad, you know, programs for the summer at Yale that Yale facilitates. You can apply to study abroad programs that are taught through Yale, so they're officially like Yale studied or Yale sponsored programs, and they're like courses at Yale. Or conversely, you can also take just general, you know, like study abroad programs at other universities or just other study abroad programs that like Yale can approve and give you credit for. So there's kind of two different avenues that you can take. But basically you can take those in the summer, you can take like them in the fall term or in the spring term. But initially I selected a program that was going to be taught in the south of France for I think about 6 weeks. And that was just going to be like personal travel writing with like no electronics. You just focus on like writing about nature and the environment. But there's like a wide variety of like study abroad programs that you can take in like a variety of different fields. Like there's life sciences programs, there's like public health programs. I think they span almost every continent except Antarctica. Like there's history programs. A lot of popular study abroad programs are language programs. So to fulfill their language requirements, a lot of my friends actually will start doing their language maybe their first year, and like they'll finish the language requirement like, you know, that summer in like a different country. I've had friends who have studied abroad in, you know, Ecuador for Spanish. I have friends who have studied abroad, I think, in South Africa, studying like global health and like public policy and like filmmaking. I think I had one friend who like went to Ireland and did like some history research there. But it's definitely very accessible and like it's pretty easy to apply to. You just have to like keep mind of what all the deadlines are. But in terms of all the programs, it's like definitely a bunch of different field areas, but it's also something that's fully fundable through Yale if you want it to be, or like almost fully fundable. So every Yale student will see like a variety of like kind of guaranteed grants and awards. One of those guaranteed grants is something called the International Summer Award. And so I believe you receive like an amount of money that is proportional to like the amount of, I think, financial aid you receive as a student if you're receiving financial aid. And then you can put that towards your summer program. So like for myself, for example, like the cost of going to France would be completely covered by Yale because I think they were going to give me around like $8,000. Like the only thing I was going to have to like cover in terms of personal pay was my flight. And even then Yale has a bunch of like smaller fellowships and smaller like different grants you can apply to that if you want to, You can go like study abroad, or go like do internships in other countries for free. We have this term at Yale that we call like kind of finessing Uncle Eli, if you will. But basically, all that's just to say, like, there's a lot of money at this university. There's a lot of money at this university endowed in gifts and grants. It's meant to be used, and it's meant to be taken advantage of by students like you and like us. And so absolutely, like, you do not have to pay for things if you don't want to, or like if you can't. And in fact, you shouldn't, because the money is there to be used for you as a student for that purpose. But all that is to say, like, there's a ton of different study abroad programs, and they do count towards your actual Yale credits. So you could use those to kind of like accelerate, the rate at which you graduate. Like if you want to take fewer classes your senior year because you knocked out more credits over the summer, between like your first and sophomore year, or sophomore and your junior year, that's also an avenue you can take. But definitely lots of study abroad opportunities at Yale for sure. Someone asked, how accessible are the professors for students? That's a really great question. And generally I think they're very accessible. A story I like to tell is my very first semester at Yale ever, so my first year fall, I took what's called a first year seminar. And so first year seminars are seminars that are exclusively designed for and only accessible to first year students. I know coming in as a first year, I had like a lot of fear about how like I would only be allowed to take like the intro classes, or like I wouldn't be allowed to jump right away into classes that were like really compelling and interesting and complex, because I would have to like quote unquote like learn the ropes, like earn my seniority. But I don't think that's necessarily a thing that has to happen like at Yale at all, because there are all these like great seminars that are designed specifically for you as a first year to jump into if you want to. And there's also, higher level seminars you can apply to right out the gate too. But I took this first year seminar taught by a professor in theater studies called Hal Brooks. And it was called Composing and Performing the One-Person Play. And so basically just over the course of the whole semester, we read a bunch of plays. We like wrote our own plays, and the final was, I think, like writing our own like 10-minute one-person play, and just performing that. But in terms of accessibility, the following semester, I was like kind of getting my summer plans together, and around like February or March is when like a lot of different students will start kind of forming their different, summer plans. I, as a first year student, I had no idea what I was going to do for my summer. I didn't know where to go. But actually my professor from that class reached out to me and was like, hey, Logan, like I loved having you in class, I'd love for you to intern at this internship, I teach over the summer. It's called the Cape Cod Theater Project. And so he basically like invited me and like guaranteed me a spot just because, I was in his class and he offered. And so I looked on the website and I said, thank you, professor, but like, unfortunately, like this costs too much. I can't afford the tuition. Like, I'm not sure I can come. He was like, oh, okay, that's fine. And then the next day he sent me an email and he's like, hey, like I found this fellowship through Yale that can fully cover the tuition, like your travel costs, like anything you might need, like all of your Ubers, like, transport to and from the airport, that can all be covered for this fellowship. And also, by the way, like I wrote you like a letter of recommendation in advance. So let me know if you like need help with the application. And I was like, wow, like I didn't even ask for any of this. Like I didn't ask for this connection. He just like, went out of his way to help me. And then I ended up studying, theater in Cape Cod for 5 weeks for free. I was like chilling on the beach, but then also doing theater. But all that is to say, I think professors are like very, very accessible. Yale is a very like undergrad centric university. There's no professors who are like, I don't know, like exclusively like, unfocused on like teaching undergrads, because I think most professors are required to teach at least one undergrad course. And like they're very involved with student life, and they're very excited when you're interested in them and interested in their work. Also, all professors are required to have what are called office hours. So that's usually 1 or 2 like 2-hour segments during any given week where they're just chilling in their office and you can come by and talk about their class, like your past work, your grades, like honestly life, like your future and like the career, the major. I also believe all like Yale professors or Yale faculty get, they get like free lunch in all the Yale dining halls. So it's actually very common for students like send their professors an email, or like even professors they don't know, and be like, hey, like I like your work. Do you just want to grab lunch together? And then you'll just grab lunch with the professor and talk. But I think they're very like approachable, very friendly, not at all like cold and removed. Like I still have like kind of like talking, like working relationships with most of my professors. And I think if anything, one of my biggest regrets as a first year was that like I didn't reach out to my professors more, because they're really friendly and like ultimately like they want to see you thrive. But I think they're very accessible and they're very open. It just depends on how much you as a student want to engage with them as a person, but also as an academic. Scrolling through some more questions. Tristan asked, because you're going into your senior year, So technically it would have been my senior year, but I guess my junior year fall, what would have been my senior year, yes. Have you worked with Yale to find employment / internships after graduation? How helpful / effective do you think those resources at Yale are? So that's actually, I think, a really great question. And if you guys ever come to multiple Stufos, there's a student called Robert, who I think is going to be here on Tuesday, so tomorrow and also Thursday. And he's actually a post-Yale grad, but he's still helping out some, and he can talk a lot about some of the great like post-grad opportunities that Yale helps you out with. But I think Yale in general is like pretty good with helping you find like employment or internships after graduation. A lot of people will find those like their senior year through like professors, through like past internships that they have done. I know one of my friends was, I think like they did like a journalism fellowship during their like senior year, and like they just worked at like I think a journal in Texas while they were taking classes. There was like a job offer like lined up for them afterwards. Some people just focus on applying for jobs in like the summer after their senior year. Some people will get jobs like working with their professors. They'll get jobs like through like grad school, through like past like research opportunities they've had. But I think Yale in general will like do a lot to help you. And that's both in the sense of like Yale as in like the broader like institution, like resources that are available to you while you're here as a student. But there's also, I believe, like alumni Facebook groups. There's like alumni spreadsheets, like people in like different cities. I think you can reach out to like different like alumni like in your area, and they can help you find jobs, like get you in contact with people like in your different employment areas. So right now I know, for example, like I haven't even graduated Yale yet, but I'm on the mailing list for what's called the Colorado Yale Association. So like at any given time, I have like email access to like almost all of like the Yale grads who like are in Colorado or like who are living in Colorado. So just in general, I think it depends on how much you reach out to other alumni and like how much networking you've done like during your time at Yale. But I think in general, there's a lot of ways you can set it up before you've even graduated, but there's also a lot of Yaleys who find employment and kind of like the downtime between, you know, when they would go to grad school and like when they graduated, or even just the downtime between like kind of like that last second summer. But I think they're relatively effective. I mean, definitely like it depends on like your different major, like what you're going into. And like particularly like with the pandemic, like theater, for example, is probably like a lot harder major to like graduate out into, as opposed to like, I don't know, doing like journalism or doing, you know, something with economics or quantitative reasoning. But I think overall they're fairly effective, both in the sense of like you reaching out to like Yale directly, but also there's going to be like other people in your graduating class, people who graduated like the year before you, who you can also reach out to. And I think Yale alumni in general, like very like friendly and like assistive in helping each other. That was a good question. Let's see. Emily asked, what is your favorite part about student life? Are there any clubs / organizations that stand out? Well, obviously I'm going to be super biased because I'm involved in theater and poetry. And one of my favorite groups on campus is the poetry group I'm in called Word Performance Poetry at Yale. It's just a really great community of writers for me that's about 14 to 15 people. We meet 3 hours every Wednesday. We just write and chill together. But I think what's true of Word that's true for like a lot of different extracurricular groups on campus is that there are also like extracurricular groups, like, you know, for whatever interest you're, you know, thinking about, like sports, you know, singing, all of that. But there are also families in their communities. I think it's very hard to find just one home or just one place where you feel like you belong at Yale. There's like lots of different like insular pockets of homes, like multiplicities of homes almost, if that makes sense. So I think it's just a space where it's like, oh, I have this like chill group of like writers and poets. But then I'll go to like Heritage Theater Ensemble, for example, which is like Yale's Black Arts Collective, that was founded by Angela Bassett in 1979. That's like another group of like Black creatives like I hang out with. I'll go to like some of my theater shows and I'll see like old cast that I was with. Like that's another like community that I have. So I think I really love that like all the different kind of like clubs and organizations on campus can be like different hemispheres where you can find a sense of home. But that being said, like a cappella is like a really, really, really huge thing at Yale. I think there's over 16 registered singing groups. So if you want to sing, like, by God, you will find a group to sing in at this university. Like singing is really, really huge. Shades, for example, which is a group that sings songs of like, you know, the Black diaspora, like has like really big concerts. They're a really big fixture on campus. There's like the Yale Debate Association. There's tons of like intramural sports clubs. There's all of Yale's publications. So there's Yale Broad, which is like Yale's feminist publication. Yale Politic, which of course writes about the politic. There's the Yale Daily News, which is really popular, which does like a lot more kind of like beat reporting and reporting around Yale and New Haven. But I think there's honestly like a lot of different clubs that you can like find and like get involved in. And all of this is to say, like, if you want to make your own club, and I believe I saw a club or a question earlier about like the process of making your own club, like you can just apply to Yale. I'm not even sure that you need like a professor necessarily to sponsor it. But a fun kind of personal story is my first year, I lived across the hall from a group of, I think, 4 to 6 other guys. And for like all hours of the night, they would whistle and it would just like drive me mad because it'd be like 2 a.m. and I would just hear like a chorus of whistling. But they seriously wanted to form like a whistling a cappella group that they called the Whistle Poofs, which is a play on words because like one of the big a cappella groups at Yale is called the Whippin' Poofs. And we were like, you guys aren't going to get like club access. Like you're not going to make like the Whistle Poofs into an actual group. And like, no, we are, like, watch. And now they are a registered like group at Yale that does whistling a cappella. And they performed once at one of like our residential college community nights. So all that is to say, like, if you want to make your own community, if you want to make your own club, you can absolutely do that. And it can be like serious and super formative, or it can also be kind of like, you know, more fun and lighthearted, like a whistling a cappella group. I have a friend, for example, who just really loves bread. Like she just loves bread. So she founded a baking club and she got money and funding from Yale to just bake in like the residential college kitchens. So there are some of like the bigger, older, more institutional ones like Word or like Shades or like a cappella groups or the Yale Daily News that you can join. Those are more structured groups. You can make your own. There are more low-key groups. It just depends on what you're looking for. Yale also has 4 cultural centers. So there's the Afro-American Cultural Center, the Asian American Cultural Center, La Casa Cultural, which is like the cultural center for Latinx students, and also the Native American Cultural Center. And there's also a 5th cultural center that's in the process of being established called the Middle Eastern North African Cultural Center, but they're still in the process of, I think, finding a building and finding a dean. But that's all just to say that's a 5th kind of development that's happening right now. But all of this is to say that all 5 of those, or 4 of those cultural centers and the one cultural affiliation group that will hopefully eventually become a cultural center, all also have their own different clubs and organizations. Like there's like a Black Student Board. There's also, I think, like a group for like Asian American students, like Asian American Students Council. There's like different like cultural, like, you know, arts and performance groups that reside in each of those different, you know, cultural centers. So pretty much anything you can imagine or want to start at Yale, you can definitely like bring to fruition. But all that to say, like, I think they're very formative in their communities for, that like care about you as a person rather than just you as a product, like what you can produce. Like whenever I'm in Word, like whenever I'm in theater, I always feel like I'm a person first. I'm in a person and community first, rather than just like, oh, I'm here to act, or like I'm here to like fulfill a role, like I'm like labor for someone else. I think it's very much they cultivate like a sense of family. Like that's really important in a lot of different Yale extracurriculars. Yeah, a really great question. It made me think about some wholesome memories I have. Someone asked, how safe is New Haven? I think in general, I've just seen a couple different questions about New Haven safety. I think there's a lot to unpack there just in general as a question. I personally feel like in my estimation, walking around New Haven, it is like a very safe city. So colloquially, there's kind of like some Yale lingo in what we call the Yale quote unquote bubble. So if you think of kind of like a very misshapen angular polygon, basically like there's all the 14 residential colleges, anything at the edge of any of the residential colleges and like pretty much around them and like the kind of circle or triangle they form, like Yale's like New Haven grid, and anything inside of that is like very, very safe. So Yale has what's called a blue light system. They're pretty common, I think, at most college campuses. But basically they're like kind of tiers or poles of blue lights that have like emergency dials. They have like little speakers where you can call for help. They're structured so that each blue light is visible from at least one or more other blue lights. So they form a chain all around the entire campus. So at any given point, if you're walking around New Haven or if you're walking around Yale, you can like buzz one of those and like get help immediately. There's also Yale security officers who you can request to walk with you to and from any distance, like big or small, around New Haven at any time of day or night. So I have friends sometimes who will just, you know, request for like someone to walk with them from like the library to their dorm, or from, I don't know, the library to like a restaurant or something like that. And if at any given time you want, you can schedule an escort. Also, Yale has what's called Yale Safe Ride. So basically think of it as like a free Uber service you can request from Yale. So from, I believe 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. At any given time, you can drop your address or drop your location, and you can request a ride from any point on campus or in New Haven to any other point. So if you need a ride at any time of like day or night, that's within those hours, you can also get that. So those are all things like Yale does in general to ensure your safety. I think in terms of like personal safety, like personal like student safety, it's like just a big thing in terms of like just student culture, just like student dynamics. Like most people, walk with friends, like they just walk alone, or like they don't walk alone is what I'm saying. They walk in groups. It's like very much, I think, in the Yale culture to like care for other people and like, care like they're getting home safe. Like I'll regularly volunteer to my friends, like, hey, like if you need me to, like I will go out of my way to like walk you home to make sure you're safe. That being said, I think like New Haven is like a very like relatively safe city. I do think sometimes the quote unquote like unsafe, aspects of it do get blown out of proportion. And like a lot of ways are like very like complex, like sociologically like to unpack. Um, like I've never really felt like in danger or harmed or like threatened. While I've been here, like walking around, like I've walked around at like various times of the night, like 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m., like headphones in, face down, looking at my phone, like I've been fine. That being said, I think general city etiquette is always important to practice. So like, don't do what I just said, which is like, don't walk around with like both of your headphones in, like, look around you, like generally like be aware of your surroundings. And like, I think for the most part, like you're safe. Yale also has what's called, I think, like a text alert system. So anytime like any kind of like crime does happen in like the Yale or New Haven area, like the chief of like the Yale police, I believe, will like send a text that will go out as an alert to all of your phones. Like if there's a given area you want to avoid, generally like you can avoid that area. The area in question, like, crime may have happened in. That being said, like nothing really happens inside like the quote unquote Yale bubble or like really even near the bubble. Like whenever we do receive those alerts about, X, event has occurred, like XYZ thing has happened, it's kind of like further out near like East Rock or some of the further neighborhoods are like far like miles and miles from Yale, but like some of the grad students live. But general on campus, I think it's very safe. There's a lot of ways for you to ensure your safety and make yourself feel safe. And I think in general, like New Haven is a city, like all cities, so like keep your city etiquette aware. But I don't think it's like inherently quote unquote like dangerous or anything like that. I will say also like my experience of navigating New Haven is informed by the fact like I'm a man, I am like 6'3". So like my experience walking around New Haven at night is and probably is going to be different from like my peers who are women, peers who are like women who are like shorter than me are walking around. And I know that that does inform like how they perceive safety. But those same resources are available to, all Yale students in terms of like, making sure that you feel safe and, are safe at any given time. Just scrolling through some more questions. We do have a lot. I don't think I'm going to get to them all. But I will try my best to answer as many as I can. And of course, any questions that don't get answered, please feel free to come to another STUFO, or also feel free to send those questions to the Yale admissions link that I dropped earlier. Rachel asked, how do you spend time with your friends other than clubs? Do you have any tips to balance workload and social life? Yes, I would also love to know the answer to this question because I'm kind of still figuring it out. I think it's a question that you figure out throughout your time at Yale. But other than clubs, like there's like so much to do at Yale. There's so much to do on the weekends or even the weekdays. I think beginning in like late September through like late April, there are like multiple theater shows that go up every weekend. So it's really common in Yale culture just to, go see the other shows like your friends are in. So like all of my friends will come see like my poetry shows, my theater shows. I'll go see like any theater shows they're in. There's a bunch of like performance dance groups on campus. So DanceWorks, for example, is like a kind of dance group on campus. It's like dancers of all experience levels. They'll host like different concerts and performance events. All the a cappella groups will host concerts. People go to those on weekends. All the like dance groups, all the poetry groups, all the singing groups will all host events. Also, all the different cultural centers will host usually like food events or kind of like getting to know you events or like meet and greet events. Those are also really fun to go to. I'm trying to think of what else. Oh, there's also an event that this is kind of nerdy. Like it's called Global Grounds. So every Friday and Saturday from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m., it's kind of like this hall on Old Campus, which is kind of like the main structured like ring of dorms that most first years stay in. But it's called Dwight Hall. So inside Dwight Hall, which is part of Old Campus, there's just a bunch of like tables with like, I don't know, like board games, like food, like things like animal crackers, like lemonade, like tangerines, cookies, like chips. And those are all like various, like, different types of food, like you can just go and like have. And so basically like Global Grounds is just like a place for like chill vibes and snacks, and, like music. So sometimes me and my friends will be like, yeah, like we're going to get crazy tonight, guys. and really we'll just like go to Global Grounds, eat animal crackers, and like talk about our feelings at 1 a.m. And so that's one way you can spend your night. That being said, like, parties are also a thing at Yale. Fraternities do exist, sororities do exist. Party culture is definitely something you can get involved in if you would like. There's various, dance parties and like, locations on campus you can go to. Obviously, I believe those are like super, super different now with COVID and like the ethics and, kind of structures that are different because of COVID and because of the pandemic. People also sometimes host like sweet parties, like in the past where they've gone to, dance with their friends, like a Bluetooth speaker and kind of like a chill setting. All that is to say though, like you can kind of like dip in and out of the different social hemispheres and like different social experiences with your friends as much as you want. So say like you're a person who like, you like to party a lot, you like to dance. There's nothing to stop you from making friends with someone who like mostly wants to, hang out in Global Grounds, like only see theater shows, like play board games. And actually in a lot of like situations like those different like social groups like do and can like overlap. So I think in general, like there's a lot of different ways to spend time with your friends. Those ways don't have to be mutually exclusive, and you're not going to be excluded from one different social hemisphere just because you're like involved in a certain group or, involved in a certain like set of experiences. And I don't think by any means like any one set of like hanging out dominates like campus life. So like, I think fraternities in general, like party culture in general, doesn't dominate campus life. Kind of like the chill, more hangout scene doesn't dominate campus life. I really do think there's something at Yale for everyone. And there's almost like too much to attend, like too much to enjoy and go to. But in terms of like balancing workload and social life, one useful like technical like concrete tool for me is something called a Google Calendar or GCal. Some of y'all might be using it already. But basically it's just like a whole like, hour by hour like visual representation of like your time. So I'll just like plug in events, like hang out with this person then, or, like around here, like, this class occurs then. Say you have to like in every moment of like every day in order to goals, but just sometimes like having a visual representation of how all of your stuff is organized can really help. So I think getting a GCal or even just like any kind of written planner where like you write down your stuff can really help you like figure out all of your workload. I think even with using a GCal, like I still have like blank swatches of space where like I can just like do whatever. I can like take a nap, I can vibe, I can go like just chill and vibing and all that. But I think overall in terms of balancing just like being mindful of your time and being like very present, there's like that Ferris Bueller quote, right? That's like, I'm gonna misquote him terribly, I'm so sorry, but y'all love that movie. Like, looking around, like remembering like, your time is time and time is happening now. Just being like extra present of the time you are in currently can help you like take advantage of, some of that. But yeah, I think it's definitely possible to balance workload and social life, and the two don't have to overtake the two depending on how you schedule your semester. That was a good question. We're getting low on time, so I'm going to try answer as many as I can. But as always, feel free to send more in. Emma asked a great question that I think is actually really important to the whole Yale experience and just applying to colleges in general. But do you have any favorite things to do / places to go in New Haven? So yes, I absolutely do, and I think one of the hugest mistakes I could have made or could have risked making as an incoming Yale student, or even just as like a Yale graduate, when I do graduate one day, is that I would spend all of my time in Yale and not spend any time in New Haven. New Haven, I think, is a really rich city, just like culturally in terms of like cuisine and other things, and there's so much to do and experience here. Obviously Yale is Yale, but Yale is more than Yale. And I think Yale should also be New Haven, if that makes sense. Like, don't just restrict your college experience to like living inside the actual college and like building itself. But like New Haven is famous for like, I think honestly it's food. It has like some of the best food in America, high key. But there's one strip kind of near some of the dorms called Broadway. And there's a ton of different restaurants. So like Ivy Walk and Main Garden have a lot of like Chinese cuisine. There's also Arethusa, which has like really great ice cream. I'm trying to think of all the places that have been stealing my money on takeout food. Pataka has like really good Indian food. Sandra's, I think, has like a lot of really good like Black American like Southern cuisine. All of which is to say like there are so many great restaurants and places to go out and eat. I'm also a big fan of like taking walks and just being out in nature. And also I know like being from Colorado, like I just miss particularly like old growth trees. Like just being like feeling like I'm surrounded by nature. So there's a lot of parks in New Haven, like within walking distance of campus. There's a place called East Rock actually that I just hiked to yesterday. It's kind of like I guess you could call it a mountain, but it's really more of a hill. It's very like kind of like a densely forested area. There's a bunch of hiking trails, so sometimes I'll just go hiking with my friends. Yale and New Haven will also just host like a bunch of like cross-cultural like collab events you can attend if you want to. So like the Afro-American Cultural Center, for example, hosts like every, I think, semester or every year, something what's called the Hip Hop Block Party. So like there'll be like poetry performances, there'll be like dance groups that perform, and at the end of it, there'll be kind of like a giant like hip hop dance battle tournament that's attended by people from across New Haven, from across Connecticut, from even from like Pennsylvania. And so those are all, you know, fun things that are ways to like interact with like New Haven and the New Haven community. But I think overall, just, you know, eating out, exploring, walking around. There's also lots of great ways to like develop relationships like with like people in New Haven, like the New Haven community, just through like social justice and activism, working with different New Haven orgs, working with Yale organizations that work in partnership with New Haven residents. But I think in terms of concrete places, mostly like restaurants. There's this like beauty supply store called Beauty Plus, like me and my friend Cleopatra go to. And it's run by like this really sweet elderly couple, and we just like talk to them every time we buy stuff. So there's kind of like a fun friendship there. But I think overall, just like I would really emphasize like exploring around New Haven. But definitely like the restaurants are the biggest thing for me. Like I spend way too much money on food outside of the dining halls. Just scrolling through some more questions. Jack asked, "Hi Logan, I'd like to ask you if the music department at Yale plays an influential role in the community, and how does it look like to pursue music academically and extracurricular?" Smiley face, thank you. Well, first of all, thank you for the smiley face. But I think there's a lot of ways that music does and like can like be involved with Yale life. And so in general, I think obviously like a cappella is a big thing, but that's mostly for like singers and performers. But I also think instrumentally, like music does play like a huge role at Yale. So I think there's the Davenport Pops Orchestra, which is like a group of various instrumentalists, like I think bassists, brass instrument players. You can tell I'm not very well acquainted with musical instruments. But like, you know, all various kinds of instruments, and they'll kind of like play in like kind of like an orchestra, and they'll perform. I also have a lot of friends who like are like instrumentalists and also vocalists, and they've kind of like taken their own initiative to create their own opportunities at Yale, if that makes sense. So one of my friends is like a phenomenal singer. She apparently finished like third place, like Chinese Idol. Super famous, I guess. I didn't know that. To Kathy's question, it's the Davenport Pops Orchestra. I think they're Googleable, and I'll try and drop a link if I can find one at the end of this TUFO. But my friend Emily, for example, who's like a vocalist, got paired with one of my friends whose name is Caroline. She's like a really, I think, like wonderful pianist, like a great, like passionate composer. I think she's taking some questions, like, or taking some courses like simultaneously with the Yale School of Music. And there are some graduate courses that are available to you as an undergrad if you want to take them, I believe. But basically what they got together and did was they got a grant from Yale through like a creative and performing arts grant. And they basically just got a bunch of funding from Yale. And like through that funding from Yale, like they recorded like an EP together. Like Caroline would like compose songs, like Emily would sing to them. They formed a band. I think they dropped like an EP on Spotify together. I had another friend who was just, he loved playing the bass. Like he had other friends who loved playing the bass. Like he formed like a little quartet band. They also got funding through Yale. They hold their own concerts, like little performances for, you know, all their friends in the broader community. So all that is to say, like, I think a lot of music that's done at Yale can be like super like independent. Like you can go out and make your own music opportunities with Yale's resources for you if you want to. But there's also tons of music classes that you can get involved into. I know George, who's like is another one of my friends, also like has done some like piano like rehearsals, like some like piano study with the Yale School of Music. But I think that music, I believe, is like a concrete major at Yale, and it does have not like an overwhelming impact, but like there's a bunch of different ways that you can get funding through Yale to, you know, fund musical performances or fund, you know, musical composition. So all of that is to say, you can pursue it academically if you want to through the official major. You can also pursue it extracurricularly through your own self-made extracurriculars. There's a bunch of different music groups you can join. Low Strung, I think, for example, is like a cello group on campus that plays the cello, but they play like non-traditional arrangements, so like pop songs, like rock songs, like all on the cello. They're like a big fixture on campus, like for performances. And some of my friends who play instruments will also sometimes play in like the pit orchestras for undergraduate theater productions and also graduate theater productions. So honestly, music is like really versatile at Yale, and like any possible way that you want to kind of like actualize it can happen. It just depends on ultimately what you want to do. But I think it definitely has a big role in the community. But that was a good question. I just muted myself by accident. I'm so sorry. But I'm probably going to answer one more question, and then I'll get into our ending question that we usually close out our STUFOs with. So Anonymous asked, why did you choose Yale? Which is a really great question. That'll be our final question. And I can kind of fold that in with Toby's question of what you love most about Yale. But I'm just rolling through a couple more questions. Max asked, when applying, does being undecided reflect negatively on admission application? I'm not 100% sure what I want to major in. So like absolutely like being undecided or like coming in with one major, like changing it after you get in will not affect your time at Yale like at all. It's just to get like a gauge of interest of what you might want to see more in terms of email communication, like what more like we can help you out with, like what we like imagine like the class might be like when you're admitted. Like being undecided will not hurt or harm your application in any way. And in fact, I think most people come in unsure of what they want to major in. So absolutely don't worry about being undecided when you come in as a major, or what you think you'll major in coming into Yale. And then finally, someone asked, how's the residential life? Like, how many people do you share your room with? Is there a shared shower? So great question. So just just for background, most Yaleys in general live on campus and live what's called the 14 residential colleges. So think kind of like Hogwarts and like the 4 houses there, but there's 14 of them. So basically you'll live in your own residential hall. There's different dorm rooms, different entryways, and kind of like structured tiers of floors that you'll live on. Most people will live in suites of around 4 to 6 people. They can be as large as 8, they can be as small as 2. Some people live alone in singles. It just depends on kind of how the dice roll falls out for like how the different like floors are built in terms of like how your dean structures your college. But generally like the rooms are pretty nice. I mean, the buildings are old, of course, like some of them are hundreds of years old, so some of them don't have air conditioning, and I think people do their best to like attend to any problems. Like there's lots of services you can call to help make your rooms better at Yale, like various different like dorm life hotlines. But I think in general, like when I lived on campus, even though I'm living off campus now, like my first 2 years, I enjoyed it. I got really close with all my suite mates. One thing that your dean will actually do is you'll submit like a little survey like the summer after you're admitted. And then the dean will go through, like the dean of each residential college will go through and they will personally like read all of your applications. They will hand design each of your dorms such like you're around people who are similar to you, but like different enough to where you can see like a wide range of life experiences. I remember I came into Yale and like on the first day, I was like, oh my God, my roommate is just like me, but also he's nothing like me at the same time. So it was really fun getting to know him. So you'll be around people who are like relatively similar to you in terms of personality type, but also there's questions in that survey like, how do you feel about loud noises? Like when do you usually go to sleep? Are you like more of a messy person or a neat person? How do you feel about organization? So they'll group you with people who have similar living styles as well. But in terms of sharing a room with, there's usually no more than 2 people in one room. And then you'll be living in kind of like a shared suite of like 2 people in one room here, 2 people in one room here, and like maybe an overall large group of like 4 or 6 people that share like a common room or living room. And there is like usually like a shared set of showers like per floor. So there's, I think, usually 2 or 3 showers on each floor that you'll share with, your suite, maybe one other suite at any given time. And I think that's just part of like logistics of college, like figuring out how you use the shower, like, what times everyone is showering. But overall, like, I think the facilities are like relatively clean. I actually kind of like my room. I felt like I was living in a castle my sophomore year. But I think they're pretty spacious. Like, I enjoyed my time living on campus for sure. Now, as we round out the STUFO, I wish I had more time, but unfortunately, there's only an hour. As always, like, please feel free and like, please definitely do come to other STUFOs throughout the week. And also, just as a reminder, I dropped the link again that at admissions.yale.edu/questions is a place where you can send in your questions to me. Well, I mean, not to me specifically, but I will be answering them. Students like me will be answering them, all undergrads. We'd be happy to answer any questions and all questions you have. So just feel free to like, send in any emails there. But just rounding out the STUFO with the question we always like to finish up with, which is why did I choose Yale, and consequently kind of like why I like love Yale, like why like I found it here was I think ultimately the people, which I think is an answer you'll get from a lot of Yale students, but I think you'll get it from a lot of Yale students because it's true. And so a story I kind of like to round out a lot of my STUFOs with is one of my best friend, Cleopatra, who I mentioned earlier. So my friend Cleopatra, she's also an English and theater studies double major. We have like a lot of the same dreams. We really love, just acting and writing and all that. And so both of us have the same dream of getting into the Yale School of Drama for graduate school. So we were kind of like doing some joint research together, and we were looking on like the Yale School of Drama website, and we saw that they have like a 1.5% acceptance rate. And so we were like, oh, maybe we need to rethink this. So we got like a little bit hesitant, but then one day I was looking on like, the theater studies like frequently asked questions website, and I saw this tiny little blurb that said, usually every year, the Yale School of Drama, like the graduate school, will take, 1 to 2 undergraduate students and, graduate them up and, accept their applications into the actual graduate school. So like I screenshotted that, like I cropped it, I like texted it to Cleopatra, and I was like, hey girl, like there's still a chance for us, like we might make it. And then what she texted me back was, so what I'm hearing is it's going to be you and me, Logan. And so I just tell that not just because it's a wholesome story, but just I think part of why I chose Yale was like the sense of community that I feel. And also like, I'm a person with big dreams. Like I'll just say that like I have a lot of ambitions, like I have a lot of things I would like to do in this life. And I feel like I should do in this life. And I think Yale is a place where you can achieve those big dreams together. Like there's very much a culture of collaboration. I think what drew me to Yale, like while I chose Yale, was like this sense of like a lot of the people here, like the sense that I got when I was visiting as like a high school senior, is that Yaleys approach their time at Yale, but also just life in general from a place of abundance rather than from a place of scarcity. Like it's not cutthroat here. No one is trying to sabotage you. No one is like hiding like their notes or like answers to the homework. Like it's very much like lift as you climb, trying to build other people up. How can we both get to this dream together rather than like crabs in a barrel? There's only so many spots at the top. Like I think really just there's so many moments in my time at Yale where I never felt so celebrated, never felt so loved by the community. And I just kind of got like that vibe of like energy and effervescence when I visited as a high school senior. So I would just emphasize like my advice to you as you're all like, choosing colleges or thinking about colleges, like it's also, a place of academics and a place where you're studying, but it's also, a place where you're living for 4 years. It's a physical place where you're living for 4 years, but also like it's an emotional place where you're living for 4 years. So think about, where you feel most at home, where you feel most cherished, where you see yourself building a home or multiple homes. And basically just also remember that college is a place where you will do best if you are happy. And part of that happiness is informed by how you feel received by the community. So all of which is to say, like, I just chose Yale because I saw that there were so many different communities where I felt like I would be really held and cherished. And with that, I know the time is 1:01, so I want to be respectful of everyone's time. As always, feel free to submit to that admissions link that I dropped, and you can always come see me around to other students around and other STUFOs. But thank you all for a lovely afternoon, and I'll see you around maybe. Goodbye, everyone.